This is the Everything's a Primary Source podcast, the show where the pop culture of an era is turned to for history lessons. I'm your host, Eric Paul. Today's episode has us going back 40 years to talk about one of the first and one of the biggest blockbuster movies, 1984's Ghostbusters. I spoke with Michael, a native New Yorker who now lives and teaches in Minnesota, and we chatted about some of the analytical questions needed to define Ghostbusters as a document of its time and place, the early 1980s in New York City. But not all of the questions were covered. If you and/or your class would like to add to the talk, just visit the classroom section over at everything-history.com and see what's available. So I'm here with Michael, and he is visiting the National Council for Social Studies conference in Nashville, Tennessee, all the way from Minnesota, from near Minneapolis. And have you enjoyed the conference so far?
First time. I'm actually a new teacher. This is my second career.
Okay.
And this is going to sound corny, but I was like almost in tears walking through this. Just to be surrounded by so many people with the same teaching can be a little bit isolating, especially in the winter months in Minnesota.
I imagine in Minnesota, yeah, especially. I feel the same way too. It's like seeing like thousands of the same of us. Like we're all just kind of replicated over and over again. It's really nice, very collegial to be here. And I always ask people when they choose what they did, what is it about Ghostbusters that caught your eye? I assume you liked the movie.
It was a movie that came of age when I was, so I'm 40, so it was released in the late 80s, and so I watched it a million times.
Yeah. Have you bothered with any of the newer ones, like the?
So I've seen every iteration, both the female-driven one and the more recent one directed by Reitman's son.
Yeah.
Right? And honestly, I was pushing because there was a few I was going to select of your pop culture moments that I can immediately see the historical relevance of. Mm-hmm. I was considering South Park, but there's so much in there about blame Canada and all that. It's like it lends itself a little easier to this conversation. So I was trying to pick one that I just see as like a hilarious movie and have never quite thought about as anything more than that.
Like why it's a product of 1984, not of 1974, or not of
correct.
1994.
And as you say that, I can immediately understand why.
It's like, so the question I chose is, what ideas or behavior does it convey? So this is the part of my template of primary source analysis that I should really devote like a whole page to. Because in my class, this is a conversation, or at least what the students write into that section can go on and on and on, because there's lots of ideas conveyed in especially an hour and 45-minute long movie. But who are the main characters of Ghostbusters? What kind of job do they have?
Two of them are aspiring scientists with legitimate credentials.
Yeah.
One of them is sort of pseudo-psychologist who's just really a womanizer. Never paid attention. In school. And one of them, I believe, is a former garbage man.
Yeah, because the one they recruited at the end.
Yeah, Winston. I think his job before he might be a garbage man. I can't remember. But so they're sort of scientists who are studying the paranormal.
Yeah.
In many ways.
And they ultimately are small businessmen because they get kicked out. They lose their grant money in the university, and then they like, well, what we have all this ideas, we have all this equipment. I always kind of see this as like alternate reality because there's a lot of ghosts. Like, if there was even just one of those ghosts in real life, it'd be all over the news. But they just kind of like, oh, we got a ghost in this ballroom, and there's one in the library, and so it's like there's this need in the economy for waste disposal of ghosts, and they're like, well, we have the capital for that. They take out a huge loan. I forget which characters.
Egon or Stan. Who is it? Dan Aykroyd's character mortgages his house.
Yeah, and it's like 75%.
I was going to say that interest rates is really funny there because even the base interest rates are like 40 times higher than they are today. And you're like, oh yeah, interstates used to be in their 30s.
And that's what. And there's like, he's like, I can't believe I just did that. And so it's like, but they take a risk. And in that same time period, we have movies like Risky Business, which is the same idea. You know, they have that scene early in the movie when all the characters are going around the table, being like, oh, this is how I'm going to get rich quick. This is how I'm going to do it. It's very Reagan-esque. It's very Reagan America of like.
Is this around the same time as Wall Street?
That comes around the same time too. Greed is good, right? Everything is, and so it's like
How to succeed without even trying.
It's and that message. So I'm paraphrasing. There's a pop culturist that I love her work. Her name's Lindsay Ellis. You can find her on YouTube. She writes books about everything, and she did a nice job comparing Ghostbusters with another movie from the same time period called They Live.
I came here to chew bubblegum and blank.
Yeah, exactly.
Blank, and I'm all out of bubblegum.
And that one is like a capitalism is bad. Ghostbusters, capitalism is good. Because, and then think about who. So the main antagonist, of course, is Gozar.
Nope. But the main antagonist is the EPA.
Big government shows up and shuts them down. And one of the scenes I love showing is when they first meet the EPA guy, and he comes into, Dr. Venkman's office, and he's like, Mr. Venkman. He's like, Dr. Venkman. He's covered in all of his goo, ectoplasm. He's wearing coveralls like a blue collar guy. These are real, like, working class guys that just want to start their own business. They buy a crappy, old ambulance, and they reconstruct it to be what they. So it's like the story of small business guys up against the man, trying to, and then they eventually be the heroes of New York. But is there anything else going on there? Maybe if we take in some of the other bad guys, because like I said, that's just paraphrasing somebody else. I don't want to just be like, well, that's it. We're done. Do you see any other kind of behaviors or ideas showing up in Ghostbusters that is maybe not precise to 1984, but just 80s-ish, that it's like very telling of the time period?
There's a lot of classism in the movie, like really broad characters still, but like a lot of like, you can't come in here.
Yeah.
There's like a fancy restaurant and a guy banging out, the guy banging on the window before he gets attacked by the monster, and they all come.
Nobody does anything.
Look at him. Nobody does anything. So, and that's very growing up in New York. That division was very apparent. Who rode the subways, who didn't, things like that.
Right.
And that's not even a point of the movie. It's just because it was filmed in New York at that time. That is a part of it.
I think it was Sigourney Weaver, who's in the movie, and she's from New York. She said it's the ultimate New York movie. Like, you really can't have that movie take place anywhere else. Mm-hmm. It's like New York is one of the characters, really, and 1980s New York specifically, because it was very much a divided city in that regard. I remember visiting there as a young kid, and just seeing, like, my mom covering my eyes as we're driving on a bus through Times Square, because it was in the 90s when it turned into Disney World North. It was like X-rated movie theaters, and
42nd Street was like a thing.
It was
you
like,
said it.
Like, you don't want to be there, and so it's like that. This movie kind of captures that, and almost like the rot, because like you have ghosts, you have corpses that are, going after everybody and bugging them, and they don't want to deal with the rot. They're like, these working class guys pick it up. They have those blue collar guys do it.
And there's almost, I think you mentioned, like the idea that if anything like this happened in the real world, it'd be national news. But, like, maybe not in New York, because like we have pizza rats, and we have, New York has all these wild things happening. Maybe ghosts would be just like, it happens. But
another one. Titanic showed up again.
Yeah, and he even in the second one, like the rot is actually formalized in like the evil ooze under the city, right? But the thing I was thinking as you're talking about was the montage when they're finally getting going, and like the ghosts start appearing more often, and you see them going through the different locations in Manhattan, and like in the Chinese restaurant, coming out with the duck, like hitting, and then like the trash papers, the like New York Post and stuff, are like hailing them as working class heroes, like Ghostbusters. Again, we're sort sort of butting up against that similar idea, but you do see that like everyday New York that they're interacting with.
And then outside the movie itself is the blockbuster aspect of it, where it was among the first class of blockbuster films in that it was saturating. They had the t-shirts, they had the music video, the song that went with it. I mean, Ray Parker Jr. was a nobody, quite literally. He has a name, but like, he wasn't an accomplished musician. They didn't bring in, Tina Turner to sing for Beyond Thunderdome, like she did for that. It was like, here's this guy, make a Ghostbusters song. We need to churn this out because it's a big marketing thing.
He crushed it.
So it's like that theme of capitalism in the movie is repeated outside the movie with
toys, cartoons.
The cartoon, the comic book, everything was just both front-loaded and afterwards. I mean, I remember trying to play Ghostbusters. I didn't have the toys, so we used sticks, and I used a brick as the catcher thing.
The trap.
The trap, and I would like throw. I mean, thankfully my friends moved out of the way. I was like, yeah, get it in there. And but it was like, that was like the coveted toys. Everybody wanted the backpack with the neutron. And so it's like, all that stuff is classic 80s. I mean, that's like, it just screams 80s of like that method of merchandising.
But again, so I really don't know if we can venture into this topic. We'd be here for hours, but who were all those things advertised to? You, a young boy.
Yeah.
Right? And so it became the property of young men in the 80s everywhere. And so suddenly in 2000 whatever, when they try to re-release it with women at the helm, it like triggered a significant portion of the population who believed they owned it.
That's our movie.
And I think that if that movie's released in the 70s, that's not part of the real dominant culture. Like that sort of male-centric toy culture with Nintendo and action figures and G.I. Joe emerges in the 80s. I'm not sure we had that in the 70s or 90s as much. And so I'm not sure you have that reaction to a re-release of something that's not an 80s movie. So I think that actually, in a weird way, reflects 80s culture as well. Because of the people who loved it, look who's reacting to it when they try to redo it.
And the same thing with the Star Wars movies that they've come back out, the sequels, that you have this online community that gets very angry and they're like, that's not my Star Wars. And you're like, yeah, you're right. It's not. You're not the audience anymore. They make these movies for, because I remember when the Star Wars movies, the prequels came out starting in '99, being really disappointed in that because I was like, this isn't. I love the original ones that I grew up watching over and over again. But then in retrospect, I look back on it, I'm like, yeah, but I don't think at age 18 I was really the target audience for that. It was more, because the original Star Wars was aimed towards kids. Some adults found some enjoyment out of it, but they were kids. And so you're making like a Star Wars movie for 10-year-olds. I'm 8 years older than the target audience. Of course it's not going to be what I want. And then add 20 more years to that, and I'm going to be super disappointed with the modern ones because it's not my Star Wars. But yeah, it's not. You're not the audience anymore. It's these kids who grew up in the 2000s, the 2010s. So it's the same kind of thing with Ghostbusters. Like that, I haven't seen the new ones. I know they're coming out with another one soon. And I know they brought back some. I love talking reboots and sequel and like reworkings and stuff because the number one question is why did they do it? Why now? What are they trying to do with it? And with something like Ghostbusters, it's like, yeah, the female one, it's like we're trying something new because this is a new era, but we feel the story is worthy of bringing in, like, giving other parts of our society a chance to take on those same roles. And that's why they did it. And so it's...
and the pushback, I think, if you were to give them any benefit of the doubt, which I don't, I think it was a real sad statement on... I often think of it as a sad statement on where we are now, but honestly, as we sit here and talk about it, it's a sad statement on men raised in that time. But the one sort of thing that maybe they're arguing is that the new one, the most recent one, is continuing to build on the story that they fell in love with, whereas there is, I think, a feeling that the other one was trying to erase it, and remake it in a way that is more modern, and instead of acknowledging and moving on, we're erasing, and that ties to the Force Awakens and the Last Skywalker, or the Last Jedi. Sorry. The Force Awakens and the second
Jedi,
one.
And then the Rise of Skywalker. They're all just kind of...
One of them is everything we love about Star Wars just repeated, and the other one is, let's think about this, let's erase it all, kill the past, let's start again, and people went bananas.
Yeah.
And what is it about us now that is making us react so incredibly odd to our upbringing? Like, why are we so... I don't know. Is nostalgia... You work in this field. Are there always eras of nostalgia the way that we're seeing now, or is that...
Yeah, I mean, even the original Star Wars was a nostalgia film because it's modeled after those serials
samurai movies,
and the serials from the 30s, the Buck Rogers and the Flash Gordon type stuff. It was meant to bring, like, George Lucas actually had to fight pretty hard to not have credits in the opening of the movie because those movies from those Saturday matinee things didn't do that. It was before Hollywood made that a thing. And in the 70s, American Graffiti, which just turned 50 this year, another one of his films, is a 100% nostalgia movie. Nostalgia is very powerful. It has always been very powerful. We don't recognize it as much. Like, when you if you watch nostalgia as something that was made in the 20s and is hearkening back on the youth of the people in the 20s, we don't see it because we didn't experience either time period. So it's really not like, okay, whatever. Like when they did The Great Gatsby, the one from just a couple years ago, it was a fresh start because anybody who was alive and enjoying the 1920s by that point was like pretty old and probably not alive. So you're not going to worry about... I personally didn't like the incorporation of all the modern music and the special effects in that because I'm like, I think the story of The Great Gatsby does enough on its own. We don't need it. But I understand why they did it because they're like, well, we want to keep young people interested in this classic literature piece. And it was like almost made to be guaranteed that they would have it in English classes in high school as they were reading The Great Gatsby. They're like, all right, it's a Friday, let's turn on the latest Gatsby movie. Because that's what, in our high school, that's what they did with the 70s one. It was the same kind of thing. So when nostalgia shows up, I think ultimately the people that keep the aggravation away from them do a really nice job if they keep one foot in the past, the tried and true, and then pivot with their other foot with something new. And that's why, like, Rogue One didn't get nearly as much. In fact, I love that movie, and a lot of Star Wars purists do, because even though it had a female main character, the imagery, the way that they shot the movie, and the language in it, even just their costumes, look like the original film. They even brought back some of the characters from the original film, and so it's like one foot firmly planted in the past, and the other one pivoting nicely into new things. And I think if you do that, which is really hard to do, you keep the loud voices in either end of the spectrum away. So like people who are like, what are you doing? Or, you're ruining my childhood. I've heard people say that. To then saying, why aren't you pushing boundaries? Why are you just recycling the same things over and over and over again? That Marvel's movie just came out and it's got terrible reviews, but I'm like, at least they're trying something new, right? At least they're trying an all-female cast of heroes instead of the token woman or no woman at all. Because a lot of those superhero movies, like the 80s Superman movies, Lois Lane is never ever part of the actual struggle. She's always the victim.
Yeah, her character biography is like one sentence long. It's like hard and fast reporter who can't spell.
Right.
We're done.
Can't differentiate a guy because of his glasses. So, I know I kept you longer than 10 minutes that you said.
No,
you were gonna stay.
I want to talk about this forever. I was flipping through the movies to think of, like, as we were talking about Star Wars. Goodness gracious, I could talk about that for days. It's super interesting. I love this.
I got my podcasting inspiration from. So I've always loved radio, but podcasting in particular. There's a show called the Star Wars Minute, and I fell in love with them because they take every single movie and they break it down by the minute. And so they said, they're all right. This is the beginning of, Empire Strikes Back. Minute 1, we see, the fanfare for 20th Century Fox. And
oh wow! Even
they do that, and they're not. Neither of the guys are hardcore Star Wars fans. They love the movies. They, one of them actually feels that they should never have made sequels. They should have just kept with the original. But they're kind of casual fans, very smart guys, very aware of culture and history and stuff, and they bring in guests. They can produce 45-minute long, sometimes hour and 15-minute long episodes in just 1 minute of a movie. And I'm like, that is not only enjoyable as heck to listen to, and they're funny. Like, they have really great sense of humor, and they, just like a real Star Wars fan would, they poke fun at their favorite movie. Like, they point at all of its problems, and I ended up having one of them on my show because I kept reaching out. I'm like, you're the reason I'm doing what I'm doing, so I would love it if we could break down Star Wars together sometime as a primary source. And that's one of the strengths of the medium, is that podcasting can be super specific. You can spend as long as you want talking about a subject. It's not commercial radio where it's like, we got to go to a commercial break now. It's like, we have to have a broad audience. It can be very specific. So thank you for taking part.
That's all right. Before we go,
sure.
Favorite line or scene in Ghostbusters? Let's bring it back to the.
I think it's. I've been awake for so long today. It's
all right. I couldn't remember.
But I think that scene I was describing before I like a lot, but there was always the part of the montage that I didn't understand until I was an adult, and you know what I'm talking about, where is it Ray?
Was he asleep?
And he wakes up and there's a ghost, and then he crosses his eyes, and I'm like, I never understood that, but then now I do. I'm like, man, they were, for a movie geared at mostly kids, that was pretty edgy. So. You're
describing like the entirety of Dirty Dancing for me. When I saw it a second time when I was older, I was like, oh my god.
Oh.
My favorite was always the, I don't know why this caught me. It sort of established my sense of humor, but when Bill Murray is trying to clean the space for the trap when they're trying to catch Slimer for the first time.
Yeah.
And they're like, go, wait, and he goes and he grabs the...
Oh, yeah.
And he pulls it away, and everything crashes, and then the camera cuts away from it. He's not even on the screen. And he goes, and the flowers are still standing. And I've always found that, I don't know why, I just love that just like cutaway line. Killed me.
Bill Murray can get a little bit... be too much Bill Murray sometimes, but that's like, that movie is the right amount of dosage of Bill Murray. That and Stripes for me is like the two that I like him a lot the most in. So,
well, thanks for talking to me.
It's been wonderful.
It's a great one.
Everything as a Primary Source is building a digital archive, and you can get involved. Perhaps you would like to add to this conversation, or start a new one about history through pop culture. Go to everything-history.com to learn about the Everything as a Primary Source project and how you can take part in this exciting new educational resource.